All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Sens Nation podcast. Let's jump right in. We got lots to get to. Claude Giroux talks. We got a draft combine that starts this week. The Sens need a right shot D at some point. Erik Brannstrom is no longer even an NHL player. We'll get into the Stanley Cup final. The Leafs need new DNA and much more here on the Sens Nation podcast. It is Steve Warren along with a coach, Greg Kennedy. Greg, how are you?
I'm good, Steve. As we're recording here, it's a beautiful, beautiful Sunday afternoon, at least to look at. It's awfully chilly, though, but it looks good out the window.
Yeah, we're recording this on June 1st. We really haven't had any sign of spring yet, really. We've got greenery out there, but there's not really been any warm weather. It'll just slide right into summer any second now. But there is no off-season, really, for Sens talk. And Claude Giroux, as Bruce Garriock saying that talks are intensifying this week, which would suggest that there's interest on both sides. Not a huge surprise. But I wonder, Greg, if this is a team that is really fancying itself as wanting to get bigger, as maybe the NHL draft suggested last year, playing that kind of heavier hockey, does Claude Giroux really fit in with what they're trying to do here, do you think, still?
Well, I think Claude Giroux fits in other areas, right? Whether his production was still very good. I think he fits in as a leader, as an elder statesman, as a respected teammate, and in the room and all that sort of stuff. So I think you don't. Plus, there's also the bad PR. Let's face it, the bad PR if he's not signed and walks or whatever. Worse still, they trade him. I think that would hurt more than anything else they could possibly do. So maybe he doesn't exactly fit in as the DNA of what the Senators are looking for. But he still would no doubt be could fit in the top six. You'd probably prefer that he be in the middle six, maybe a third line guy. But yeah, they want him back. Unfortunately, we've talked a lot about 3.5 to 4.5. It looks probably more like it's going to be 4 to 5 million, and that's kind of steep. But I think they're going to have to do it.
Boy, if you start to get to that number, then I start second guessing it. So long as it doesn't go over 5 million, I think I'd do it. And I think that we talk a little bit about the size maybe too much. I think everybody's thinking, whether it's draft or whether it's re-signing guys or signing guys in free agent, that Steve Staios only wants big guys, largely because of what he did at the draft last year. But you forget also that the guy signed a bunch of guys who aren't that big, whether it's Nick Cousins, re-signed Ridley Gregg, Michael Amadio, David Perron's not the biggest guy in the world either. He's been signing guys along the way that aren't behemoths, mammoths, we'll put it in NHL terms for Utah. So I don't think that you need to look at everything as you're previewing the free agency season or the guys the Sens have to take care of or the draft season. You don't necessarily have to go to that card every time. Yeah, size is nice if it's there, but you're always going to want best player available and what is accessible to you. He's not going to just say, not big, don't want. It's not that simple, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And let's not forget the whole character factor has played a big role in the signings that Steve Staios and the trade acquisitions. Character is probably number one on the list here. Good citizens, good players, quality guys who've been around and contributed. So I think that the character factor is probably number one on the list, even above size. And it's also different drafting versus acquiring, right? Like free agency and trade, you have a little more background. You have a lot more history there to look at. There's a lot more meat on the bone when it comes to studying these players and knowing what you're getting. So the size factor maybe doesn't matter as much with an acquisition versus a draft pick.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, it sounds like we both agree that Claude Giroux is going to be an Ottawa Senator again, though I still don't think it's going to be. There's so many people that say he's going to have to take a haircut. Maybe half of what he made last year. I just don't see it. Just be disrespectful to a guy who might be going to the Hall of Fame someday to just sort of cut his salary in half. He's willing to take a hometown discount. His family is obviously happy here, but I think you also have to be reasonable at the same time. I know every dollar counts under the cap, but you also would like to get that guy back and also be reasonable at the same time. Now let's move on to what's happening this week. The NHL Draft Combine is set for Buffalo this week. It's a chance for GMs and amateur scouts to sit down with players, ask them questions, get him on the scale. You know, I was looking at some small guys in the first round of the draft, and you look them up and you see his height and his weight. But it is nice to actually get your, tape measure out, get him on the scale, see what he actually looks like as far as size goes. Just one of the things, conversations with the player, putting a face to the name that you've watched. So if you're running an NHL organization and you're going to the Combine, like what kinds of things are you looking for?
Well, I think the biggest thing that can maybe come out of the Combine is an opportunity to talk to some of these guys. With the way the draft is set up this year, it's not centralized, right? So there's none of those in-person, face-to-face meetings that you have in your hotel room while you're in whatever town the draft is in. I think that might be the biggest bonus out of this. And also, you get to watch these guys right up close while they're going through all the various exercises required in the Combine. So you get to see firsthand, up close, what's going on. But to me, the biggest is an opportunity to talk to some of these guys. I know the Sens are doing Zoom interviews, but it's just not the same. Like, it's nowhere near the same. We all know that. Having a Zoom conversation, totally different than talking to somebody in person. You can see body language. You can read signals. You can read facial expressions much easier when you're face to face with someone. I think that's the biggest thing you're going to get out of this weekend for the Senators anyway.
Do they overrate some of the dialogue? Like, at the end of the day, you want someone who can play hockey. You want someone who's a hell of a hockey player out there. And if he can't properly answer some of these trick questions, like if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Just these questions that are almost meant to confuse, to see how they mentally sort of handle things. Like, to me, that bears very little resemblance to what you are as a hockey player. Do we sometimes maybe sometimes the scouts overrate some of the answers to these questions?
Well, you're right. There are questions about the game, and then there are questions that seem so esoteric that I don't even know why some of them get asked. But and there's also the fact that every single agent has sent these guys to some sort of media expert or conversationalist expert so that they have answers. If you there's probably a list of 15 or 20 questions that every one of them has a pat answer ready to give. That's why you get those funky questions, those out there questions, because the GMs and scouts, they know that the player has an answer to that question. But it's the follow-up questions, it's the probing questions. And to me, it goes back to that character thing again. Certain questions can elicit a response that shows what type of personality you have, what type of character you have. And I think that's where you get into those. But yeah, there's some stupid questions that get asked that we hear about every year. And I really don't understand why some of those get asked. But character-driven questions for sure are the key for me if I'm doing these sorts of interviews.
All right, let's. I found a clip from Don Boyd from last year's Draft Combine, leading into it in the first week of June last year, and this is courtesy of the Senators YouTube channel. Head amateur scout Don Boyd on what the Combine is all about to him.
The first thing, number one, is to put a face to a nameplate and see their actual physical size and know then, through the interview process, as short as it is, get to know them a little bit, get to know their maybe the family background, the family history, the medical history on them, and get to know them as a person rather than just a hockey player and a number on the ice. So our job is to figure out, how good a hockey player they can be, but also how good the person is, what kind of character he has. And I think through the viewing process of seeing games and then the interview process, the testing process, we can finally paint a picture of these players. So it's an important process for us.
All right, so there's Don Boyd, the Sens head amateur scout, talking a little bit about the Draft Combine. One going into last year, and you mentioned it already, it's going to be a very different draft, so it probably changes a little bit of the tactics you have at the actual Combine in the lead up to it. And as we move ahead to the draft, the Senators will be drafting number 21 overall. And if you look from 2020, when they had 3 first-rounders, to today, this is the first time that one of their picks, I shouldn't say that Ridley Gregg was late in that first draft in 2020, but the point is, this is a different kind. It's been a while since the Sens have been down in the early 20s, and I guess let me know what you think. I mean, at 21, is pretty much anything on the table as far as what the Sens might do with that pick?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, huh? Do you still stick with the best player available mantra, or do you want to consider filling a need? I think the idea all along, usually the idea is I'm going to take the best player available with the positional and the size, and there's some other factors being a tiebreaker. But I think you get down to 21, when you get into the second round for sure, but when you get down to 21, if there's a group of 5 guys there, Steve, I think that position might factor into it, and I think other things might start to play into your selection, because generally speaking, this late in a first round, and especially hereafter, into the second and third, you're not getting a superstar. You're not getting a top of the lineup guy. At least not. You shouldn't expect to, right? You should be thinking bottom 6 forward. You should be thinking bottom pair defenseman, or you're thinking possible someday number 1 goaltender, because that might be the time when goalies start getting taken. So yeah, I think other factors might creep into their minds beyond the standard best player available.
Yeah, and I think the draft for need thing is something that needs to, I want to say, be redefined, but reframed anyway. To me, when people talk about drafting for need, it should always be what are you going to need in 3 years, 4 years from now? You're not drafting for need because of what you need this fall, because that kid is obviously not going to be able to be ready to be the kind of impactful player you want to fill that need. So it's a lot of long-range projections. So to me, when you say draft for need, you shouldn't be looking at the active roster. You should be looking at the roster as you think it will look in 3 years from now. And if you see in the pipeline that you got no centers, for example, not that the Sens are in that boat, but you have no centers, then, well, that's in 3 years from now, you obviously got to deal with that. And so that's a great time to deal with the drafting for need policy. Let's hear what Steve Staios had to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have good scouts. I think they've proven along the way that they can find talent. So every draft year you go into it, and people say the drop off's at 12, and then there's a group of this or that. But I trust in our group.
Carter Yakubchuk joined the team as a black ace during the playoffs. I'm just curious what next steps could lie for him. I think he turns 20 before the end of the year, so he's AHL eligible. But what's next for him?
Yeah, that'll be up to him. I think we spoke to him, at our exit meeting with Carter, and he knows how important this summer is for him. And you get opportunity with the Ottawa Senators on merit, and if he's ready to play and pushes us, we'll be open to that. But certainly he's got, like all of our players, need to take this off season. Like it's improving the roster, talking about how we can improve. Like it starts now for our players, and so time will tell. But he's he'll let us know.
And he can play AHL, just to confirm.
Correct.
Next season, right?
Yes.
There is Senators GM Steve Staios at the season ender back on May 5th. And nice of him to segue to Carter Yakubchuk and the right-hand D position. And getting back to my thought about drafting for need, they do need a right-hand defenseman, and it remains to be seen whether Yakubchuk is ready to take on that role. And it's a very important one because right now there's not a lot of depth there to start with. And at the moment, we don't know if Nick Jensen, after having surgery, or Bruce Garriock speculating that it's a hip surgery. Well, if he's not ready for next season, they're in kind of a bad way in that right now they're looking at the business end of Zub, Matt Palo, and maybe Lassi Thompson or Max Gannett if you're looking at third pairing options on the right side. That will not do, Greg. That will not do.
It's interesting you brought up Lassi Thompson. You must have read the same thing I read this week, that he's ready to return and looking at a 2-way contract. But anyway, I think that when you talk about the idea of drafting for need, one of the other criteria under that is NHL readiness. And I bet that factored into the Carter Yakubchuk selection, is that they projected his NHL readiness as being maybe a little bit earlier than others. And that might have explained why they kind of slightly went off the board with that pick. So let's face it, based on last year's preseason, he sure looked NHL ready then. So if that was the case a year ago, why wouldn't he be NHL ready now? So he may find himself in the lineup. They may kind of have to put him there because there's not much out there on the trade front, and I don't know that they can afford to pay Aaron Ekblad, I guess, a right shot D free agent. I don't know that they're going to be able to get him either financially or that he wants to come here. So yeah, you're kind of leaning on Yakimchuk because I don't like Lassi Thompson, and I don't like Matt and Paolo playing that high up in the lineup either. So it's Yakimchuk or a trade, I guess.
Certainly Thompson is a guy who had a decent year over in Europe, but I'm inclined to agree. I say bring him over because I think he can help the Belleville Senators, and he does add depth in emergency situations, but I certainly don't want to start the season with either him or Max Gwinnett. And Gwinnett, by the way, is an RFA, so there's no guarantee he's even going to sign again. Whether they qualify him or not, I don't know. Steve Stais did last summer in the same boat, so maybe he will again, but we don't know at this stage. But I think we have to keep in mind, too, that the assumption that Nick Jensen won't be ready, that has not been declared. He might well be ready for training camp, and then things will be fine. If Jensen is out, for the month of October, I think they can get by putting Carter Yakimchuk in the NHL, again, kind of in the same way that teams do with these guys on 9-game auditions.
With Celebrite, enjoy effortless, customizable lighting for any event, holiday, or special moment. Our energy-efficient LEDs blend seamlessly into your home and are easily controlled through our app on your smartphone. No ladders, no hassle, just year-round brilliance. Celebrite.ca.
The Ford It's a Big Deal event is on, and right now at Jim K. Ford, you can lease a 2025 F-150 STX with black appearance package from $220 bi-weekly at 0% APR for 24 months with $43.75 down. That's like $110 weekly, plus a $750 bonus for eligible Ford owners. Hurry in, these offers won't be here for long. Visit Jim K. Ford for details or online at jimkford.com.
At Jim K. Ford Lincoln, we say yes!
Well, after some big changes with tariffs on alcohol and just about everything else on both sides of the border, here's the perfect opportunity to try out something truly local, the great products from Dunrobin Distilleries. I highly recommend picking up a nice bottle of their Beaver's Dram Canadian whiskey. It takes a lot of hard work and craftsmanship to make a whiskey this special, and who knows hard work and craftsmanship better than the Canadian Beaver? And that's why it's called the Beaver's Dram. Made in Van Clayk Hill, Ontario, just outside Ottawa, all of Dunrobin's spirits are crafted with pride with American options off the LCBO shelves. It is time to raise your glass to something that is uniquely ours. Discover DunrobinDistilleries.com. Bold, smooth, and always Canadian.
One defenseman who's no longer in the organization and now no longer in the NHL is Erik Brannstrom. And apologies, it's been a few days since our last podcast episode, so maybe we touched on this in the last episode. I don't think we did. But Erik Brannstrom, he has, he had such a miserable year last year, I'm sure. Not that he was bad in Vancouver, but here's a guy that this time last year, he's thinking, okay, I'm a restricted free agent, I'll re-sign. I had just played 2 straight years here in Ottawa, playing over 70 games each year. New GM comes in, not loving the tiny defenseman thing, and so they don't even give him a qualifying offer. He signs in Colorado, doesn't make that team, ends up in Vancouver. They trade him to the Rangers, and then the Rangers trade him to Buffalo, and he didn't get a sniff with either the Rangers or Buffalo in the NHL, and so I think that has really soured him on the NHL, and to some degree the NHL has soured on Erik Brannstrom. And now he has signed on to play in Switzerland for the next 3 seasons. What say you about Brandstrom coming? Well, I mean, he could return, I suppose, in a way that maybe Thompson is this year. But what say you about Brandstrom turning the page on the NHL?
He's made a decision for himself, right? He wants to play. The guy wants to play hockey. He hasn't really had a chance to play a regular shift of hockey in how many years now? Like, come on. I don't blame him. It gets to a certain point where it's time to go. And in Switzerland with the big ice and the game he plays, he's going to love it. I think he'll do just fine. And I doubt he'll ever return to the NHL.
So Carrison Price, they do a podcast in Vancouver, and at one point in the season, they were endorsing moving Brandstrom into a top 4 role, and I think one of them said something along the lines of he saved the Canucks season. So he had a spell there where he's looking very good in Vancouver, and then as part of the JT Miller trade, off he went. So I think the guy is still an NHL defenseman, but I think he's just discouraged. I don't think he's a great NHL defenseman, don't get me wrong, and he's certainly not worthy of a Mark Stone as far as compensation. But yeah, but I certainly think that he can play in the league, but I think he just got so disenchanted last year that he's like, okay, 4 teams in 1 year, pass. I'm going to go where, and because he played in Switzerland during the COVID shortened season. He went over there for like 10, 12 games, I think it is, and he was almost a point-a-game guy, so he knows he's comfortable there. He got an audition there, and so there's a place that he'll be able to make serious money. He'll be able to get all the minutes, and yeah, good for him. And if he's back in the NHL someday, good for him there as well. A couple of things before we go, though. We want to talk about Jacques Martin going into the Ottawa Sport Hall of Fame. I'm like, why did that take so long exactly? Winningest coach in Ottawa Senators history. And, I mean, the question I was going to ask about Jacques in association with this news was how much did his half a season as head coach of the Ottawa Senators in an interim role last season, how much did that have to do with the Sens getting back to the playoffs for the first time in 8 years earlier this month?
Isn't that a great question? Wouldn't you love to know? Like, that's something with one-on-one interviews with the players and asking them, you know, like, what kind of an effect did Jacques have in his half season here? Because you'd like to think he would have impressed upon them the need for proper preparation, the need for proper mental preparation. I think he would have had an effect on those that were open to him and those that related to him. Like, there are certain coaches that you can relate to, and certain coaches where you're not really tuned in. And I think that the guys that were willing to listen and wanted to learn and were more like a sponge, minds work best when they operate like parachutes, right? They work best when they're open. Guys that wanted to learn would have learned a lot from Jacques Martin, just as the guys that wanted to learn from Daniel Alfredsson will learn a lot from Daniel Alfredsson. So, but I was surprised, like you, that he wasn't already in the Ottawa Sports Hall of Fame. That one kind of threw me for a loop, but good on him. It's a good honor, and congratulations.
Yeah, the Barrett family is other NHL. I know the whole Barrett family didn't play in the NHL, but Fred and John did, and the dad and the mom were both so involved in the sports scene. I guess their sister was also a fantastic hockey player as well, but there was no women's hockey at the time. But yeah, I mean, all good stuff, and the Barrett family goes in, and a number of others as well. And a tip of the cap to Joanne Polak, the former Ottawa Rough Rider GM, who was also my former co-host on the old Y105 morning show, CKBY morning show. I'm not sure what it was at that juncture in time, but yeah, we were briefly co-workers and still friends today. So kudos to Joe on going into the Ottawa Sport Hall of Fame. A couple of other things before we go. The Leafs need new DNA. There's your new catchphrase in the NHL. The Leafs had their garbage bag day, and Brad Treliving had a State of the Union address last week. And this is what he had to say about the state of things in Toronto.
There's some DNA that has to change in our team. That's one thing that I found. If you keep getting to the same result, and that's not to dismiss a lot of the good that happened up into it, when you keep getting the same result, there's some DNA that needs to change. And so that's on me now going forward and our staff. Although we've been done for a little bit, we've just now started, I've talked about the changes that have happened in the organization the last few days. We've now started the planning, and it's early for putting together our team for 25-26.
So there is Brad Treliving, the Leafs GM. We already know that Brendan Shanahan is out, and there's a lot of talk that Mitch Marner will be going elsewhere in free agency. But what a nothing term that is. The DNA needs to change. You know, that's like throwing nothing out there. It certainly hints at, it hints that you might make all kinds of changes, but it also hints that you might also just want to have a conversation with everybody in that we need the culture to be better here and you need to straighten up and fly right. It doesn't really indicate anything. It's non-committal, and it made me chuckle when I heard him say that this week.
Well, we talked about what's wrong with the Leafs last week, and the biggest thing being the big four, the big five. They're high-end skill guys, and their leadership group are all the same type of personality. They just seem to be soft, quiet, soft-spoken, go about your business and go home type guys. The biggest thing that team needs is they need guys that hate losing more than they love winning. They need guys that get angry. They need guys that get mad, and guys that are going to spur teammates on. I mean, I said it last week. The biggest mistake Brendan Shanahan made was he didn't find a Brendan Shanahan to add to his roster.
Yeah.
So I get the messaging, but you're right. It's easier said than done. It can't just be a fluff away line. But give the guy an opportunity to see what kind of players he can find to bring in. I mean, he did it with Tanev. He did it with Lawton. He's found those types of players for them. He just needs to find some that can replicate the statistics that he's going to be letting go out the door in Marner or anybody else that he chooses to trade or not sign.
Yeah, I would like to hear a follow-up question like, what do you mean? What do you mean by DNA? DNA change, does that mean trades? Does that mean bringing in free agents? Does that mean just having a conversation with the players to be better?
Right.
Different kinds of players? I don't know what the hell that means. I would like to have heard a follow-up on that, but like I said, kind of made me chuckle. And you're right. I mean, that's a fair point too. That it should only be something to be chuckled at if he really does do nothing. If he really does go forward and make massive changes to the DNA, to me that means potentially trading players out. If he does do dramatic things, then that was his opening salvo to things. Lastly, as long as we're kind of second guessing what's going on with Atlantic Division rivals, the Florida Panthers would probably be everybody's pick to win the Stanley Cup. They will take on the Edmonton Oilers for a second straight year. It went to 7 last year. I like the Florida Panthers in 6, by the way. But at the conclusion of the series against the Carolina Hurricanes in the Eastern Final, as Florida won their 3rd straight East title, Paul Maurice did something unique. So let's first play back. So Florida's just won, and now we're at the point where everybody's patting the goalie on the head. The game is over. The coaches are starting to shake hands. And here's a conversation that's happening right near the benches between Paul Maurice and Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour. You can see here that they're having the conversation, and Rod Brind'Amour looks kind of taken aback and surprised by something. Maurice continues talking, and they seem to agree on something. And as we learn later, Paul Maurice had a new plan as far as the handshake line goes, the traditional handshake line that happens after every NHL playoff series, one of the great traditions in sports. This is what Maurice had to say. So there's Paul Maurice in conversation with the media and his new game plan for coaches and trainers not taking part in what he thinks should be a players-only handshake line. What do you think?
Love it. Absolutely love it. As a coach of many, many years at many different levels, I know that at the end of a series, usually you hop off the bench, one or the other side comes over to the opposite bench, and we shake hands on the ice, and we go about our merry ways. But in minor hockey, you're supposed to, as a coach, you shake hands with the opposition players. That's what you do. You used to be able to do it on the ice. Now you do it from the bench. But the idea of my going over and shaking somebody's hand on the other bench and then getting in the line and shaking his hand again at the end of the line, like, what's the point of that? And Paul Maurice brings up valid points, like there's 10 trainers and the athletic therapist and the team doctor and everybody's on the ice, the video coach and all the black aces, and like you're going down the line, you have no idea who these people are, and you're shaking hands with way too many people, especially after you've just lost a tough series. I agree with him 100%. I don't have a problem with it at all. I think it's great. If any of the players want to come over to the bench and shake Maurice's hand, like any of the Hurricanes wanted to, they were more than welcome to. There's opportunity there. But basically, 2 coaches shake hands, and the staffs shake hands, and you stand on the bench and wait. I'm right there with them. I agree with it. I love it.
I agree with everything you said. I just would like to have seen them work it out before the series started. To me, it was bad timing. To me, you as a coach, you just won the series, and that kind of gives you upper hand. And now you're going to thrust this idea that maybe Rod Brind'Amour doesn't necessarily agree with, but just kind of went along to get along. To me, that was a bad. It was, I don't know, that didn't feel like the time to spring that on Rod Brind'Amour. You know, he's already kind of like seething about the end of another season, about getting close and not getting, you know, the ring. And I just felt like the timing wasn't great. To me, there's a little bit of, because you wouldn't, I don't know, it just felt like you just won the Eastern title. I don't think he did that in the previous series or the series before that, did he?
He
I don't think
to.
so.
He wanted to. He has talked about it.
Then that's great. But have that conversation with Brind'Amour. Here's what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
Before game one, here's what I'm thinking. I bet Brind'Amour would be on board with it. I think most hockey people are. But just to spring it on him like that, moments after the final buzzer went, I thought that was a bit offside. But beyond that, I agree with you.
Either he forgot to do that, or for whatever reason, I think basically the conversation was, "Hey, Roddy, look, I'm not going to shake your players' hands. I think this is good enough. You and I talk here. Is that okay with you?" Because he doesn't want Brind'Amour to be insulted. He doesn't want the Hurricanes to be insulted, so he brings it up then. But you're absolutely right. He certainly could have brought it up sooner. As I know he did. Like, I'd heard of this idea from the last series. But on its whole, I love it. So do you. I think it's great. Now we just got to get rid of the baseball caps at the NHL draft, and then we're really good.
Baseball? Oh, you don't like the baseball caps, huh?
God, no. You're a hockey player. My dream in life is not to wear the Toronto Maple Leaf baseball cap or wear the Ottawa Senator baseball cap. My dream in life is to play for the Ottawa Senators. You're going to put the jersey on me. That's a great honor. I don't need the ball cap. Thank you. I'm a hockey player.
I wonder if it's born in vanity from the perspective of you've just thrown the jersey on and, you know, now all of a sudden the flow is a little out of place, so I'm going to throw a ball cap on there. I don't know exactly, but I don't know.
The only time in the NHL, the last time a player didn't put it on was Calgary a couple of years ago when Brian Burke was the president there, and when the Leafs were drafting when Brian Burke was there. Brian Burke is a big proponent of the no ball cap. I'm with him. Right. And these poor guys, you're there wearing your best suit, and you got your hair all coiffed perfectly, and I got to put a baseball hat on? Come on. I'm not wrecking my hair for this.
All right, well, we'll call it quits there. Lots of good stuff in today's show. Thank you for being with us, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to check out the website, sensnationhockey.com. Please check out the Hockey News Ottawa as well. I'm the site editor over there. Lots of great articles to be read here in the off-season as well. THN.com/Ottawa is that website. Greg, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next episode.
See you, my friend.